Okay, without further ado, so welcome to everyone. We are looking tonight for the Parasha's Beshalach, and as I've said more than once, there is a fascinating, inspiring material in Alshikh, and I have curated just two selections, maybe three, to share tonight. So let's get underway. Parasha's Beshalach, of course, describes the climatic events surrounding the Kriyas Yamsuf, about the splitting of the sea, as is very well known. We have here a beautiful verse, a beautiful expression. You can find it in Pasuk Ches. On page 368, if you're with me in the art scroll stone Chumash, but whatever Chumash you use, we're chapter 14, and the Torah says that the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, Israel, and the Egyptians were pursuing slave Paro Melech Mitzrayim. God hardened the heart or strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he pursued the Jewish people. And the children of Israel went out, here it says in the art scroll, with an upraised. Okay, what is the meaning of that expression? Yad Ramah. Rashi says, B'Yad Ramah, if you're with me in the art scroll Chumash, it's the very last words of the Rashi commentary on that page. B'Yad Ramah, B'Gvura Givoha Umufursemes. With a strength that is exalted and public. In other words, they didn't leave like thieves in the night, but rather they left with their heads held high, with their arms held high. It's an expression of confidence, of striding forth, leaving Mitzrayim on a high. And the Egyptians were left to contemplate the damage. Of course, the Egyptians pursued them, as the Torah said. Now, I just have a couple of comments. It's just in a not really a humorous vein, but just about a little of background. We like to add some. I'm sorry, I'll be very brief with my sidebar that I was saying. So the Shulchan Aruch and the companion, not companion volume, but it was incorporated within the Shulchan Aruch, is Rav Yosef Karo, and the Sephardim, who greatly venerate Rav Yosef Karo, they say there's a biblical remez, L'chu el Yosef asher yomar lachem ta'asu. The pasuk says, go to Yosef, what he says to you, you shall do. In other words, we are reliant and we follow the instructions of Rav Yosef Karo, L'chu el Yosef. But the Ashkenazim were not to be outdone, and they said, well, we've got another pasuk, V'nei Yisrael yotzim b'yad Ramah, that B'nai Yisrael, the Jewish people, they go out with the hand of the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, who is the guide and is the authority for the Ashkenazic world. Of course, the word Ramah is Rav Moshe Isserles, an acronym. Ramah here in the pasuk is spelled with a hey. Ramah is spelled Resh Mem Aleph, Rav Moshe Isserles. But actually, there is another sefer called Yad Ramah, written by Rabbi Meir ben Todros Halevi Abulafia, and he lived in Spain in the 13th century. You may not have heard of him, but he's wrote a number of very important commentaries on the various tractates of the Talmud, Bava Basra, Sanhedrin, and elsewhere. And he is also very well known. Ramah is Rav Meir Halevi. My point is that this turn of phrase, Yad Ramah, is found in, as I say, Jewish folklore almost. But I'd like to share with you a very different approach that is expressed by Rav Moshe Alshikh. And I also want to remind you, because just by way of contrast, and when I think about it, there may be a certain similarity here. Last year, we spoke about, my friend for the year was Ksav Kabbalah. Some of you may remember that. And he says about this expression, Yad Ramah, he says the word Yad, which of course we know means hand, but Ksav Kabbalah suggests the word Yad here derives from the word Todah. The Yad Ramah, he says, means with highest thanks. That the Jewish people left with exalted gratitude to Hashem. B'yad Ramah, they went out with Todah, like thanks, which is exalted. Ramah, very high, very, very lofty. And I wonder if he was sensitive to the point that the Rav Moshe Alshikh also raises, and that is the idea, and that was the title for our shiur today, if you noticed, high-handed. Actually, Yad Ramah, high-handed, in the English language is an expression of a person who acts in a cavalier manner, who acts in a manner which is like insensitive to the concerns of others, as if it's my way or the highway. Yad Ramah, high-handed, is actually not an expression of praise or a posture or an attitude which we would like to emulate or we would like to praise. So with that kind of extended introduction, let me tell you, Rav Moshe Alshikh asks the following. He says this whole pasuk and this turn of phrase, V'nei so yotzim b'yad Ramah, is in the wrong place. Why does the Torah mention it here 7 days or on the 7th day after the Exodus, when they have already left days before, and they're now no longer in Mitzrayim, they're now on the shore of the Red Sea, and Paro is pursuing them? Why does it say at this point Bnei Yisrael left B'yad Ramah? It should be in last week's Parasha, when the Torah actually narrates the departure from Mitzrayim itself, whether it's at midnight or in the morning. Really, the plague of the firstborn was at midnight. They left in the morning, and then you should say they left B'yad Ramah, but it doesn't say it there. It says it here. It's the first question. Yes, another question, that why does it say Ufaro hikriv? And this is an unusual turn of phrase. Let me just find it. Ufaro hikriv, it's in Pasuk Yud, in verse 10, Ufaro hikriv. Now, here it's translated in the art school people, Pharaoh approached. But the word hikriv really means to cause, to bring near. Lahakriv karban, to bring an offering. Lahakriv is to cause something to become nearby. It should have said Ufaro karav, that Paro drew near, but it doesn't really say that. Hikriv literally means that he caused something else to become near. So Rashi says, hikriv atzmo. Rashi says, Paro karav, mahu hikriv. Hikriv atzmo v'nis ametz l'kadem lifneihem. That's the way it is understood al derech hapshat. But the Medrash says that Paro was responsible for causing the Jewish people to draw near to God. Ufaro hikriv, Paro was a kiruv, in the kiruv line of work. In an ironic way, certainly not his intention, but his pursuing the Jewish people, which terrified them, had the effect of them calling out, and they started to complain to Moshe, and Hashem says, Matitzak Elai. So actually, Paro precipitated the urgent appeal, the urgent call to God on behalf of the Jewish people, which is, of course, ironic. Says Rav Moshe Alshikh that there is a medrash which says that, here's one other question. It says, Vayis'u v'nei Israel, that Paro pursued them, and he caught up with them as they were encamped on the shore of the sea. And then the Torah says an interesting expression, Vayis'u b'nei Israel. I'm sorry, it's also in Pasuk Yud. I was looking for it, it's right here. Ufaro hikriv, Paro drew near, or as we've suggested, it means he caused them to draw near to God. Vayis'u b'nei Israel es einehem. The Jewish people lifted up their eyes. So Alshikh is so alert to the nuances and to the economy of language. He says the Torah could have simply said, Uvnei Israel ra'u hinei Mitzrayim nosea. Why does it say? It could have simply said that Bnei Israel saw. Why does it say they lifted up their eyes and they saw? They saw that Mitzrayim is pursuing them. So again, the Meforshim take note of that, and they suggest actually Nosea acharehem. Nosea is in the singular. So the suggestion here is that the Egyptians were united, but there's something else as well, and that is they lifted up their eyes to behold Saro Shel Mitzrayim, the guardian angel of Egypt, because we have this idea that people or a nation have a representative in heaven that is like their guardian angel who may be an ally of theirs, not necessarily a meritorious or a noble enterprise, excuse me, but every nation has its Sar. So the Jewish people beheld the Sar of Mitzrayim, and that rattled them. And they became very fearful. So let me tell you how the Alshikh approaches this in a novel way. He quotes a medrash. The medrash says this can be compared to a bas malachim, to a princess who is set upon by bandits. And she called out, she cried, she screamed in distress. And the king heard her, and he rode to her rescue, and he saved her from their hands. And the king took a liking to this princess, and the king wanted to marry her. And he wanted some kind of communication, like we say, some kind of feedback, some kind of reciprocal expression of interest. She's completely standoffish. She ignores his affection, his approaches, and she wouldn't even speak to him at all. And the king feels very hurt. The king feels very like, as I said, given the cold shoulder. So what does he do? He gets a few other bandits around, and the bandits pursue her and abduct her. And then she screams out again. And then she is willing, she kind of breaks down the barrier, and she's going to talk to the king. And he took her as a wife. In the mashal, of course, the king is Hashem. The princess is the Jewish people. She, that is to say, the king sought to marry her at Matan Torah. The king, Hashem, sought to become betrothed, to become wed to the Jewish people with Matan Torah. But the Jewish people had no merit. They only had the merit that they were Bas Malachim, that the Jewish people are descended from royalty. We are descended from Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. So we had distinguished pedigree, we had distinguished yichus, but we didn't bring anything to the table in our own merit. So therefore, we were caught in the hands of the Egyptians. So Hashem caused the Egyptians to pursue us, and then we called out to God. In other words, the initial redemption from Mitzrayim, Hashem was looking to cultivate a relationship with the Jewish people, but the Jewish people were not interested in developing, in strengthening the bond with Hashem. So Hashem caused Paro to pursue them again, and that's Paro Hikriv, and that had the effect. But now we get to the Yad Ramah. This is a novel interpretation. He says the Jewish people had no merit. They had merit that they were the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, which is not a small thing. Hashem ultimately fulfilled his oath to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov, and redeemed their descendants, the Jewish people. But the Jewish people did not bring much to the table in our own right. Rather, when Hashem redeemed us, so we left striding out of Mitzrayim, and he says, I'll read you a few words. In a high-spirited way, not just spirited, high-spirited in that we were in good spirits, but it's like in a state of arrogance, of conceit, a sense of like skimtamir. It's coming to us. We have the right to leave Mitzrayim. Had enough of this slavery. We're free now. And he says, bilti nichna'im lefanav yisparach, not in a posture, not literally, but not in a frame of mind of subservience to God, Mashasaneh Hashem, which Hashem despises. Hashem despises that arrogance, that sense of overweening pride and self-importance. Like it says much later in the Torah, Kochi va'otzem yadi, my strength and my own power. Ki lo yahav ki'im lev nishbar v'nidke. Hashem loves humility. He loves those who recognize the kindness that is bestowed upon them from above. And he says, Shelo tachol al gasei haruach v'haya ki'ilu yadam rama. The Jewish people left Mitzrayim feeling, hey, we're at the top of the world. We've trashed the Egyptians. We've had enough of this slavery. We're on top. Al ken gerah bames hadov. Therefore, Hashem caused the dove, the bear, to pursue them, and that is the Egyptians. So according to this, and this is the novelty, Bnei So Yotzim B'Yad Ramah, we think of it, and Rashi says as well, the Jewish people were full of pride, and they left Mitzrayim in an upright posture, not like thieves escaping in the night. Says the Alshikh, there's a downside to this as well. Yad Ramah, that's why it's mentioned here, because initially when they left Mitzrayim, they probably had, a sense of appreciation. But a few days later, they thought, okay, Egypt is behind us, the future awaits us, and therefore they left B'Yad Ramah, and that was nearly their undoing. And in order to remind the Jewish people of their indebtedness to Hashem, Hashem caused Paro to pursue them, including the Saro Shel Mitzrayim, the guardian angel of Mitzrayim, that's Vayisuas Einehem, and they realized, actually, we're in deep trouble. We thought we're at the top of the world. We're in trouble. We are reliant on the Almighty. This Yad Ramah, according to Alshikh, is not a good thing. It actually precipitated their traumatic encounter with Paro, who pursued them. And now I want to share with you something else which he says. Very interesting idea. He says many, many times, he returns to the theme repeatedly, and I mentioned it already a few minutes ago, that the Jewish people had limited merit at this time. They hadn't received the Torah, they hadn't kept the Torah, they had neglected so many mitzvahs, including Brit Milah, including even belief in God itself. The Jews were idolaters, as is well known in the Midrash. Halala of the Avodah Zarah, v'halala of the Avodah Zarah. They're both idolaters. That's what the Malachim said to Hashem on Yam Suf. Says the Rav Moshe Alshikh, we see that the Torah says, V'yar Yisrael es hayad ha-Gadolah, the strong arm that Hashem used to split the sea and all of that. And it's evident that splitting the Red Sea is one of the great miracles that Hashem accomplished. And we even have the expression or the hint, kavayachol, so to speak, that it was very difficult. It was an achievement on God's part to split the sea. Now, if you think about it very superficially, yeah, I mean, the Red Sea, it's, it may not be the Pacific Ocean, but it's still a sea, and to split the waters, that they should stand as pillars on each side, this is something supernatural for sure. Okay, that's very superficial. But hey, we're talking about the master of the universe. When God created heaven and earth and all the cosmos, he did it with Asara Ma'amaros. He did it with 10 utterances. I mean, he didn't even break a sweat. It was the easiest thing for God, so to speak. We don't find expressions in the Torah or anywhere in our tradition that Hashem exerted himself mightily. It does say that he worked for 6 days, he rested on the 7th, but we don't find the indication that it was a great achievement. It required extreme concentration or skill or expertise or proficiency or effort on God's part. Such a concept is completely foreign to apply to Hashem, and the way the Torah describes the creation, etc., etc. Says Rav Moshe Alshikh, you know why Kriyas Yam Suf was much more difficult? Because when God created heaven and earth, there was no force in the universe to oppose him. There was no reason, there was no antagonism. Of course, it's true according to the Medrash. The angel said, why do you create man? Okay, that's with regard to man. The creation itself, there was no reason not to create the universe. Splitting the sea, there was a reason not to. Because like we said, the guardian angel of Mitzrayim said, hey, why are you saving these and drowning my subjects? The Jewish people are not deserving of that. They're not deserving of that kind of supernatural, miraculous intervention in the natural order. So therefore Hashem, so to speak, had to silence the Midas Hadin, the attribute of justice. And Hashem had to, so to speak, summon some effort to suppress the Midas Hadin, which had a valid criticism that the Jewish people are not worthy, are not deserving. It's interesting, we find that a similar idea later at the end of our Parasha, when Amalek came to attack the Jewish people as well. According to the well-known measures, the Jewish people were too self-assured until they, to the point that they almost were taking for granted the divine beneficence until the dog came and bit them. That is Amalek. We've got just a few minutes left. I'm sorry, because of our technological difficulties, we missed a few minutes. So I apologize for that. I do want to share with you another comment on a different subject later on, after the Shiras Hayam, after the Song of the Sea. So we have two psukim, which I'm sure is familiar to everyone here, especially because I know that some of the participants in this year are women, and I'm sure, therefore, you will be familiar with the verses later on in chapter 15, verses 20 and 21. I'm sure the men are familiar with it as well. So if you've got the Art Scroll Stone Chumash, it's on page 380. It's chapter 15, verses 20 and 21. After the Song of the Sea, that Azishem Moshe b'nei Israel, Moshe and the children of Israel sang the following song. It could be the men of Israel, because the women had their own concert. Vatikach Miriam haniviyah achos Aharon es hatof biyada. Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aharon, took the drum in her hands, and she went out and all the women. So Miriam took a drum, the other women took drums, and also these mecholos, which is also a type of a percussion instrument, apparently. He asked very briefly a few questions. Firstly, why is she called Haniviyah right over here? And why is she identified as the sister of Aharon? It's true, she's the sister of Aharon, but she's also the sister of Moshe. Even though Aaron was very great, but we know already that Moshe is the central personality here. So it could have said Miriam Achos Moshe, or Achos Moshe v'Aharon. Or you could say Achos Aharon v'Moshe, because Aaron is true that Aaron was older, but and anyway, we know that she's the sister of Aaron. We've been introduced to her. It could have simply said Vatikach Miriam, etc. Or it could have said Vatikach Miriam Haniviyah, the prophetess, etc. It doesn't have to identify her as the sister of Aaron. And even if you say that she was the sister of Aaron before she became the sister of Moshe. So it's true she's a sister of Moshe, but first she was a sister of Aaron. Actually, it seems she was the firstborn. Then Aaron came on the scene. So she became a sister first when Aaron was born. But why is it relevant here? It may be true to say, why is it relevant here? Also, he says, why is it that Miriam took the drum and the women took drums and these mecholos as well? Again, according to Rashi, mecholo, I think Rashi does say it, but according to the way it's translated here, mecholos means dances. But according to others, Radak and others, and certainly Alshikh is of the view that mecholos is also a further type of instrument. So the answer that he suggests is that Miriam HaNeviah is identified by that way because she was a prophetess before Moshe even came on the scene. And Rashi wrenches it, and he's referring to the well-known medrash that Miriam is the one who urged her parents to get back together after they had separated because of the terrible decree of Pharaoh. And they thought, why should we bear children if they're going to perish? So Miriam said to her parents, get back together because everyone is following your example. You will be responsible for the end of the Jewish people. Anyway, Pharaoh is only disposing of the boys. What about the girls? Moreover, she said, my mother is going to bear a son who will redeem the Jewish people. That was her first prophecy. By the way, she was only about 5 years old at the time. So that was her prophecy, and it came to pass. When did it come to pass? When was the Yeshua? When was the final climactic event in the process of redemption? When they crossed the sea, because it says Vayosha Hashem Bayom Ha'u, that God saved the Jewish people on that day. Because until then they were escaping slaves. Once they crossed the other side of the sea, yeah, they were slaves, but they're not on the run anymore from their captors. The captors are sleeping with the fish, as the mafia used to say. So the final achievement, the final stage in the Yeshua was when they crossed the Yam Suf. So therefore, Miriam, who prophesied about the redemption, this was the realization, the fulfillment of her prophecy. The only thing is, her prophecy was articulated originally in a time of extreme distress. In order to invoke the divine spirit, she brought the drums because she had to rouse herself to the joy, to the spirit of celebration. Now, you might say that they would celebrate anyway. Rashi does say that as well. The righteous women took instruments with them from Mitzrayim. But Alshikh has a slightly different approach, in which he says that we know from other sources, we find in Malachim, that the musical accompaniment invokes the divine spirit. So Miriam, in order to rouse herself to a state of spiritual ecstasy, she had the drum with her for that reason. And that's why she had it. But the other women, they needed, for the prophecy, they needed an additional instrument as well. So they had drums, but they needed more than that as well, because after all, Miriam has a track record of prophecy. The other women had never experienced prophecy before, but they did now on this occasion. So this is how he explains the significance of Miriam HaNiviyah, because she is celebrating now because it's the fulfillment of her prophecy from all of those years before, from all of those years ago. And that's why she's identified as the sister of Aaron, because she was only the sister of Aaron. The point is that when she first expressed that prophecy, and it was just Miriam and Aaron, and Moshe was not even a twinkle in his father's eyes, my father used to say, because her parents had separated. That's when she prophesied, if you get back together, the progeny, the son to be born, will ultimately be the redeemer of all of Israel. I thought there's a beautiful comment in which Alshikh explains the elevation of Miriam to prophecy and how the men and the women both sang the song of the sea. Thank you very much for listening. I apologize again for the technological difficulties. Hopefully by next week, those will be sorted out. And I wish everyone Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful Shabbos.